This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to this week's Killer Innovation Show. We're broadcasting today live from San Francisco. I'm out here visiting some companies and trying to get away from some of the Colorado weather this week. This week, I've invited Anthony to come on to the show. Anthony Bryden, he and I met at CES. I host an event called Pitch It, where we invited 10 startup companies to come in and talk about their companies. And Anthony's pitch definitely stood out from the Pitch It event. So I wanted to give him a chance to kind of come in and share it with all of you, so you all have a chance to hear about this. So rather than stealing his thunder, Anthony, why don't you just give us just a quick introduction about yourself, your background?
So my name's Anthony Bryden. I have been an entrepreneur for roughly the last 17 years. I've worked with the same co-founding team at 4 different startups over those.
Yeah, I read that in your bio. You guys you stay together over the years. Are you guys like friends from way back?
Yeah, we met professionally, but I think that's part of the trick. Is finding folks that you work very well with, that complement your skill sets, and working with them, again and again in different iterations. I think that is one way of not having to start up again and again.
Interesting. So in the case at the Pitch It event in Las Vegas, you stood up and introduced the company you're with now directly to. We had the room as about 35 CEOs and CTOs in the audience who are looking to engage with startup companies. But I can tell you, when you got up there and you did your pitch, you definitely got people's attention, because you're in a space that people just typically don't think about as being an area to innovate in. So I want you to talk a little bit about what Directly is all about and what is it you do.
So I think you're right. I mean, we are in the customer service space. And
kind of boring.
Customer service space hasn't seen a whole lot of innovation in the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years for that matter. But we're doing something that we think can fundamentally change and fundamentally improve that. And what Directly does is make on-demand apps that power customer service for companies like Airbnb and Pinterest and Republic Wireless. And you mentioned the Uber analogs. What these companies do is invite their expert users, to become experts. They give them our mobile apps, and then they're actually routing customer questions to those expert users and rewarding them in cash and credits when they can help a customer very quickly and effectively delight them.
So Uber for customer care. This is the hook that really kind of, the light bulb kind of went off. Not an area where I normally would have applied it to.
Well, we were very much inspired by companies like Uber and Lyft. My co-founders and I, we had toyed around with this problem for a long time, for 15 years, looking for some way to effectively solve it and deliver higher levels of service. But it wasn't until Uber and Lyft started coming up 3-4 years ago that we drew that inspiration and said that there was a different way of doing this. Now, when when most folks think of Uber, they think of the in front of the button. They think of hitting that button and having the car show up at their curb. There's an element of Uber and Lyft that is innovation behind the button, which is how they've created these networks of drivers, tens of thousands of drivers that are available, in small cycles of their time. And that's effectively when a company builds a network of experts. Their expert users could be Airbnb hosts or Pinterest pinfluers that are available, on demand. That's the piece of innovation that was really interesting to us.
Well, I think, at least in my experience, I always have the most interesting conversations in an Uber or a Lyft ride, right? Because you understand what the people's background is, and they're passionate about Uber and Lyft. And in this case, you're connecting a company with their most passionate users to actually help solve problems for other customers, which is, I think it can be just incredibly powerful if more companies could figure out how to do that.
So the analog, what we've seen with these ride sharing services is the passengers are getting a much more delightful experience.
Oh yeah, by far.
A driver that wants to be there, a driver that's passionate about what they're doing, a driver that kind of working on their own time and terms, and that enthusiasm really rolls over to a better experience.
Oh, clearly, yeah. I mean, always the cars are cleaner. The people are just more passionate, and in many cases, they're using the Uber experience, as many cases an income augmentation. It's college kids; they've got a little bit of extra time, trying to make a little extra money at Christmas time, and they get to pick and choose when versus punching a clock. They're doing it as a job, as most people think about it.
Right. So that's excited us as well, because while this initial domain for us, I mean, it is customer service, and it is building a better mousetrap, if you will, building a better engine. But, the broad conviction here that we have is that the whole nature of work is changing.
Yeah.
And it's changing from these very dated fixed models, people driving to work, punching a clock, sitting on a cubicle, sitting on a terminal, doing it all over again. It's changing to these fluid models where folks are working on smartphones. They're working on the work that they want on their own time and terms. And we think that is really exciting. And you can't get a bigger contrast in the kind of constraints of the fixed model in a call center. It's very rigid, compared to the fluidity and the entrepreneurship that comes when we build networks of experts, of people that are working on what they want when they want.
Yeah, well, that's it, right? And in many cases, you can get a level of expertise that would almost be impossible for you to train a customer care rep on in a traditional training model.
So that's spot on. And when it is a world of difference, when you call into a call center and you've got a question about your phone, for example, and it's being answered by somebody that's looking at a PDF manual.
Rather than a user of the phone.
In our networks for a cell company like Republic Wireless, that question, if you've got a question about a specific phone, it can be answered by somebody that uses that specific phone, that has been on that specific phone for over a year and knows exactly what you're talking about. And that, when it comes from someone that's passionate about the brand and expert in the exact problem, that's a whole nother kettle of fish.
Well, and plus, in this case, with your clients, do the customer service reps reveal that they're not, quote, traditional employees of the company?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think that actually would be a great thing from the conversation perspective, because I maybe trust this person a little bit more versus feeling like I'm being sold to.
So it's really important, we in every time we help a company roll out a network like this, we draw a really bright line between the experts that are part of the company's broader network and the employees. Mm-hmm. And that's very important, because even though there's a high level of performance, it's social, so the tone is always, is more conversational, so we always draw that bright line. But yes, one of the big assets is the authenticity when your question is being answered by someone that loves the brand, who sticks with the brand and the like. That's right on.
Yeah, it's like I said, some of us just like, well, particularly the millennial generation now, thinking about even calling into a call center is like, I can't even think of the last time my son called me.
Right.
I get a text message, I get an email, I don't get a phone call.
So that was the important part to us. For us, there were kind of three pieces. When a company builds one of these fluid networks, one of it is a fundamentally more enjoyable experience for the worker. The experts in our network make $200 a week on average. They make $2,000 a week, if they're top performers, and they're choosing kind of their work environment. But on the other side, the customer experiences that get opened up, when you can deliver an answer in minutes or seconds instead of 19 hours, there's whole new types of customer experiences that are very consistent with what's being demanded by millennials and younger users.
Well, that's
today.
it. I think it's actually a better connection than kind of the traditional I fall into call queue hell, rather than finding someone who I can have a conversation with, who gets it, who can solve my problem, and I can get going.
The parents, they may be willing to sit on hold, for 5 minutes.
I guess I qualify as a parent.
And
now.
they may be willing to wait 19 hours, to get a response back. But that is game over.
Exactly. In today's world, it just doesn't work. So I think, when you were at the Pitch It event, this is the thing that really just resonated with me, because I think that's where, nobody ever thinks about these kind of behind the scenes. We all think about the product, we think about customer segmentation, but most people, in the case of the innovation game, they don't think about the things that are happening behind them from the standpoint of innovation, where you can actually add a whole level of innovation value to it.
Yep. And yes, I mean, like one of the really interesting things about our early customers, when you think about customers like Pinterest and Republic Wireless and Airbnb, they're innovating fundamentally in their industries, but they're also applying that same innovation to every part of their business.
Yeah, it's that's an interesting point. We're going to come back. We're going to pick up on this, talking about directly, and then also get you some feedback since you are a serial entrepreneur. I want to get more of those stories out there. So thanks for listening. We'll be right back. Come back after this commercial break. I'm Phil McKinney, and you're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm Phil McKinney, your host. We're continuing our conversation with Anthony Bryden at Directly. We started off in the first segment giving a little bit of background on Directly being the, I guess the best description I've come up with is the Uber for customer care, bringing businesses experts in as part of, quote, a network to provide really kind of that superior support and experience for users of products or services. So today you've got what? You've got, you said Republic Wireless, you've got Pinterest. Who else is using?
Airbnb.
Oh, Airbnb.
Nextdoor.
Oh, really?
Lyft. There's a broad set of very innovative companies. And, we only launched formally 9 months ago.
So you're still pretty young then.
Still pretty young. A year in beta prior to that, and some significant R&D prior to that. But like a lot of startups, your early customers are the ones that are challenging the status quo on every possible dimension. And in the next few years, I think the onus is going to be on us to build the same sort of customer base in more traditional companies.
Right. Yeah. So in this case, 9 months, and a year before that. So what in the first segment, you shared that the four of you kind of been together as a team as part of the startup activity. So what were you guys doing prior to the work here at Directly?
So a lot of the principal companies go back a couple companies together. I've got one co-founder that I go all the way back to 98 with.
Whoa.
The companies have had a thread and a theme between them, but they've been varied. Our first company was a company that my co-founder Jeff started, which was a music distribution platform. For independent artists and for small labels. Our second one was an enterprise social network company. This is a fluid work.
So this is like a pre-Yammer?
Yeah, it was essentially Facebook for Fortune 500 companies.
Oh, okay.
My co-founder and I have always believed that there are these opportunities that get created when there's a technology shift and a cultural shift happening at the same time. And we've always looked for those kind of moments in time. And that is one of the things that have kind of unified the music company and the social networking company and Directly, which we're working on right now. But the other thread is that being entrepreneurs, we've had the ability and privilege to pick the problem that really moves and motivates us at any given time, and that can be in very different fields.
So is this a case when you talk about kind of this, finding that social shift? Are they social shifts that you guys find which is kind of a problem for yourselves, or my question is, do you project yourself and the annoyances you have as being kind of the trigger for the idea?
If you don't, I don't think you can be passionate about it. I think fundamentally the most important thing in starting a venture is to pick a problem that you believe is important and a problem that you're passionate about, and have a level of passion that can power you for 10 years, for 20 years. Because the better your company does, the longer you're going to spend on that problem.
Right.
So choosing it is really important, and the passion for it. Every startup, regardless of whether it's on the cover of Fortune, or not, every startup has these ups and downs that are profound. And if you don't believe that what you're doing is important and you don't have passion for it, I think it guarantee means that when the going gets tough, the company will fall apart.
Right. You're not going to muscle through. Perseverance isn't going to be there.
So I think that, you pick that important problem. You pick one that you're passionate about. When I talked about, it is, you can have broad set of passions. I think what we look for in addition to that is where there are those shifts coming together. And the examples I give, what we'll say, what I think kind of categorically, when the technology is shifting and the culture is shifting, there you get the opportunity for world-changing companies. So, one example, when social networks came up, the technology was there to create Facebook, but there was a culture changing and there was a cultural objection. So folks said, are folks really going to put pictures of their kids online? They laughed at it. And the answer was yes. And a $100 billion company was born. Mm-hmm. When Lyft and Uber came up, folks said, okay, the technology was there. And folks said, are people really going to are women really going to get in a car with a strange driver, at midnight on a Saturday? And the answer was yes. And another, $100 billion segment is born. Airbnb. Are folks really going to let strangers stay in their bedroom and their home? And the answer is yes. So there you've got technology that enables something for the first time, but you've also got a cultural shift. Now for us, the mobile platform as a new way to work is a technology shift, but you've also got a culture of the fundamental way work is changing, shifting at the same time. And there's always a question of whether it's going to go or not, but it does go. There you get the opportunity to create something, truly moving.
So you've brought this up twice now with this view that work is changing. What do you mean by that? You mean as far as, do companies really have employees, or do you really go kind of to this extended network of people to fulfill the needs of businesses now?
So, yeah, we think that work is moving to these fluid models really rapidly, and there's a lot of examples in consumer segments that we've kind of touched on. You've got companies like Uber en route to being the biggest transportation company in the world, with almost no fixed workforce. Airbnb being the biggest hotelier in the world with almost no inventory. Instacart, no delivery vehicles, and the like. So those things that are happening in consumer segments, we think are going to happen to the enterprise side, very quickly as well. And, today's business requires agility. And the workforce models that are 20th century workforce models, where it's really hard to hire, really hard to onboard, those models are not proving adaptable enough and agile enough. And in our segment, for example, you often can't deliver a better than a 12-hour response time, with a fixed work model and customer service, and it's breaking, So yes, we think the composition of companies is going to change. There is always going to be a fixed workforce composition, but there's whole functions that are going to be augmented by fluid workforces, and that are going to perform a lot better.
Interesting, because this does get into this whole issue of, what is the value chain that companies deliver in the future? How does that all stitch together when you don't control the value chain, from end to end anymore? You've got people from the outside coming in.
Yeah. Yes, and there's amazing economic theory on this, and there's an economist named Coase on the theory of the firm. And it used to be everything was vertically integrated and owned by one company, and then companies bought up distributors, and then started companies buying in the open market. So there's a lot of economic theory that points to this fluid future that we see as inevitable.
Perfect. When we come back from this commercial break, Anthony, I'm going to ask you when we come back, I'm interested in getting kind of your lessons learned given the serial entrepreneurialism. So when we come back, we're going to pick up from there. You're listening to Phil McKinney on Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Stay right there. We've got more to talk about.
Biz Talk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm Phil McKinney. We're speaking today with Anthony Bryden. Anthony is the CEO and co-founder of Directly, the company that's applying the Uber model to customer care, customer services, which is traditionally not an area that we think about from the standpoint of areas for innovation. Really kind of a banner list of customers using it. But what I want to talk about now, though, is this isn't your first rodeo, right? You guys have been doing this for 9 months. You had R&D going on for a year.
Since 2011.
Since 2011 in this space. But you've got a whole series of companies that you, particularly your one co-founder, and then a collection of others that you've kind of formed this team. So if you look back across all those companies, and you had to boil it down to a handful of kind of lessons learned, kind of the trials and tribulations, but kind of the lessons learned. If someone's going to think about jumping in, last segment you gave what I thought was just a great, like kind of lessons learned about how do you identify and select, an idea, from the standpoint of looking for that, the social shifts, that are kind of coming. So I'm looking for more of those because I think my listeners would really benefit from that.
So in terms of a playbook, of how we look at it, the first thing I've described is picking that problem area that you're really passionate about. That's job number one. That is the most important thing. It's not an MBA decision. It's not a market analysis. It's a pain you felt, and it's something that you think you could work for 20 years on. The second lesson is to be radically open about that idea. The tendency is to hoard it, to not tell people about it, to worry about competitive risk, to ask folks to sign NDAs and the like.
Well, you and I were talking before we went live about the fact that I just had a guy today send me an email. He's got this great idea, but he won't tell me about it until I sign the NDA. And I'm like, then I'm not going to hear the idea.
As an entrepreneur, you're signing your death sentence.
Right, you can't sign
NDAs. It's hard enough. So what radically open means taking some risk, an undeniable risk that your idea is going to get stolen, but the benefits of talking about it in terms of getting feedback on it, in terms of attracting people to it, in terms of honing it. So being radically open, is a key second point. Right.
And my point also on that whole piece is the fact that the value's not in the idea, the value's in the execution.
Yep.
And if it's your idea and it's something you're really passionate about, odds are even whoever you share it with is not going to have that passion, and they're not going to have that execution commitment that you have.
Your stomach can feel a little sick. When we started Directly, I went around to the CEOs and bought coffees for some of the folks that were proximal in the space, close to what we were considering doing, and I asked them for feedback. Because one, if they could do it in a heartbeat, if it was effortless for them, for somebody else to do, well, you kind of want to know that straight off too.
Right.
Because the last thing you want to do to be is $1 million into it and a year of your life into it when somebody just snaps their finger and does it.
Right.
And knocks you at it.
Well, also, it gives you an indication of how much competitive advantage you really have.
Yes. So you can have that pit, that sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach when you're exposing your idea and going out, and I think you've got to muscle through it in those early stages.
Right.
Third lesson, build a product really quickly and get into the market very quickly. When we started toying around with Directly, we did 3 sprints. A sprint is a 10-day burst where you're building code, and we had an initial product ready and out and on the web, in about 30 days.
Really?
And it was incredibly crude, but an expert could sign up, could answer questions, could earn rewards that we were paying on PayPal, and the very fundamentals of the systems were there in 3 sprints in 30 days. Now we're on sprint 111, today
with a bigger team
and with a much bigger team. But arguably that's 111 sprints into the same fundamental vectors that were there embryonically in the 3rd sprint. So it's really important to get out almost immediately, get into the market, get people using it. And we call that a minimally viable product. Just strip it down to its bare necessity and get out there, because that's the only way to get that feedback.
Right, and I think this whole concept of get out there fast was something that you can prove, or at least get validation from the standpoint. So in the case of the early days, did you actually have real customers, or
no? What we did was we had real experts where we were signing up experts who off of LinkedIn and off of Facebook and the like, and we were feeding them sample questions.
Oh, okay.
And test
and paying
questions.
them for it.
And sometimes, and in fact, to get the questions coming in, we built a widget network across the web where folks could ask questions about kind of any company, and then we would steer them out. It wasn't anything near our final form, but we said, how do we get, a real life simulation?
Right. So you really were able to simulate really the whole end-to-end piece before you actually had a customer committed.
In 30 days,
Yes.
and in 3 sprints. And there, in our systems now, the companies offer the reward for the experts to earn. But there we were, simulating. We were pretending the companies were offering the reward for the experts to earn, and seeing how that drove performance and seeing how that drove response times and the like. So there's a lot of art to thinking what that small scale simulation would look like, and how to hack it. Because if you have only a few lines of code, how on earth can you convince a company to get going? That can be a catch-22 and a dead end. So
right.
So whether you're starting a room sharing service and start by renting out your own room, or a ride sharing service,
and you're the driver.
I mean, if you look at how companies like Munchery, came up, they were their founders themselves driving around delivering.
Right.
That the art of kind of simulating, that initial service and doing it very cheaply, is important.
Interesting.
So we always try. We start with our own time. We start with our own money. And we really try to think, how do we vet this idea as quickly and cheaply as possible? Because, frankly, I would say that 7 or 8 of our, prior to starting directly, we had 7 or 8 ideas for something that would also tackle the same problem area, and most of them failed. And luckily they failed really quickly. They failed after just a couple months of effort. That fail fast and fail inexpensively becomes really important.
Right, it does. So when you think about, though, from the standpoint of Directly, you're 9 months into it. What does Directly look like a year from now?
So, the thing I'd say is we're 9 months after launching the company,
Right.
announcing our customers and announcing our A, but we were a year in beta all the way back to May 14 prior. And then we were 2.5 years of R&D off of those prototypes prior.
Oh,
so,
wow.
So there is a
you're the overnight success that took 4 years.
Everybody is the overnight success that takes 4 years. And entrepreneurially, like you, if you do not take the cover stories, for granted, for every successful juggernaut that truly is overnight, there are 100 other successful companies that have been working, in much longer time frames, trying to figure out and get it right. Entrepreneurially, that can be very depressing. To hear about the companies that are up and running in 9 months and thinking, I've been working on this for 2 years. That is almost all the rule when you peel back the onion. It's a lot longer and it's a lot harder than everybody tries to pretend it is.
Yep. So, Anthony, I want to thank you for taking the time out here on a beautiful Sunday here in San Francisco. If people want to follow what you're up to, what's the best place to kind of see what you personally and what Directly's doing?
So it's blog.directly.com. And that is a mix of kind of founder stories and anecdotes, and also a lot of what we're doing around fluid work models and around what we're doing in customer service.
And in the case of Directly, are you taking expert signups now, or is that done directly through your customers?
It's through the customers.
Okay.
The companies invite
Good.
their expert users in.
Perfect. Hey, Anthony, I do want to thank you very much for taking this time. You guys got a great story. I'm anxious to kind of see where you guys are going. But again, congratulations. You really kicked it out of the park at our Pitch It event in Las Vegas. I want to thank you for taking the time to joining us there. And thanks for being part of this.
It was a ton of fun in Vegas, and this was a ton of fun here.
Great. We're going to take a quick commercial break here to obviously pay some bills. If you want to get connected to Killer Innovations, you can text the word innovate to 33444, or you can send an email to innovate@killerinnovations.com if you're outside the U.S. Or check out the show notes. We'll have all the links to directly and Anthony, and see all the show notes from today's show over at killerinnovations.com. When we come back from this commercial break, we will have this week's killer question, which is really taking a look at this whole issue of the value chain, which ties in directly to the conversation that we just had with Directly. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. You want to listen to in on this killer question? You're listening to Killer Innovations on the Biz Talk Radio Network.
Biz Talk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
So are you ready to exercise your creative muscle? As I've shared many times, you can't come off the couch being a couch potato and run a marathon. The same applies to using your creative muscle to look and identify and innovate on new ideas. So this segment, we always talk about what we call the killer question. These are questions that cause you to look at problems and opportunities in a completely new and different way, forcing you to go beyond the first obvious answer, the answer that all of your competitors will come up with or others that are working in the same space. You want to come up with the idea that's non-obvious. You want to come up with something that's going to force you to go after the problem in a unique and different way. So what is this week's killer question? This week's killer question is what will your company's value chain look like in 5 years? What will it look like? Today, how we deliver the experiences to our customers is going to be radically different 5 years, just as it's been radically different if you think back 5 years from now to today. So how do you determine where you, both as an individual or a business, will be in 5 years? Humans, we have a hard time kind of even thinking about a year from now. You can't say where exactly you're going because you can't predict what's going to happen in the world. There's a lot of outside variables that you will get impacted from. However, you can challenge yourself to change. Now, change is hard. People tend to want to kind of do the same thing day in and day out. And it's that constant challenge of doing something new. In 2001, Apple's sales figures were in decline. The company at that point had yet to launch the iPhone, the iPad, or even the iPod, and was struggling to get the computer products into the big box stores. And they were primarily focused in the PC space. Their small market share made them really a low priority for most retail outlets, and the company was frustrated really by their lack of control over that potential customer's experience with the Apple products. By opening up their own chain of stores, Apple was able to control the entire value chain from start to finish. Now, the stores purposely simplified and enhanced that customer's experience with the Apple products. And today, the physical stores alone pull in literally billions of dollars in annual revenue for Apple. Now, can you replicate that kind of an experience for your own business? One area that's getting a lot of interest right now is the healthcare industry. And it's really trying to adapt to this coming, what I refer to as the gray wave. Now, the gray wave really refers to the way our population demographics are skewing older. We've got this big bubble of baby boomers, of which I am at the tail end of the baby boomer segment, that are coming along and will be aging. It's the largest kind of bubble that's kind of flowing through the whole demographic shift. Now, many of these people, some of them are childless, yet and they want to live longer an independent life, or they've got kids, but they don't want to be a burden on their families. Now, these people will, in the next 10 to 15 years, they're going to require some form of nursing assistance, nursing homes to help them with their old age. And healthcare providers, particularly with the change here in the United States of regulatory, but it's a big issue in Europe and a huge problem in Japan right now, is how do you refocus your value chain to provide a different kind of experience that satisfy these gray waivers? Now, the traditional industry focuses on nursing homes and assisted living, but what the gray wave population wants is to remain in their own house, keep that sense of independence that's defined their lives. Now, savvy healthcare organizations are looking at a new kind of assisted living that offers these gray waves the chance to keep their independence, but at the same time offer them a level of safety and security they need in the event of unexpected illness, surgical procedures where they need some help, falls, just remembering to take their medicines. Now, when a gray waiver signs up for these services, these companies place sensors in their homes. These are everything from motion cameras to sensors onto pill bottles. And basically, these sensors in the home are there to ensure that they're physically safe and haven't suffered any falls or unexpected problems. Now, these monitoring systems extend to such devices such as these caps on the medicine bottles, and they alert the nursing facility if a patient hasn't opened their medicine bottle to take their medication. And if you don't, it triggers a phone call. You get a call to remind you it's time to take your pills. Now, in my case, my grandmother lived until she was 96. Recently, she passed away about a year ago. But she lived in Cincinnati. My wife is a nurse. She kind of takes care of all the medical needs for both sides of the family. And we always had to worry about those situations. So this is a situation where it's a personal passion area for me because of you can see yourself in this, both in the case of family, parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles, but also when you start getting up into age, you start worrying about yourself. How are you going to take advantage of these things so that you can live an independent life? Now, this change with these sensors and bringing technology in is a fundamental shift in the value chain for assisted living. Traditional assisted living meant that customers lived within the four walls of a facility that basically stripped them down to their sense of independence and autonomy. You felt like you were staying in a hospital ward. Now, that model worked for years, but the technology for alternative really didn't exist. And now that the technology is available, the value chain has to evolve. And by doing so, these nursing homes can continue to give the generation of people who prize their independence above anything else, that really the product that they want to need, gradually going into these changes. So, and as you look at the ways your value chain might change or evolve over the next 5 years, consider what will happen if your existing customer group goes away and their needs change. Now, if you're aware of these changes, then you can take advantage of them and ensure your customers are getting. So the sparking points, the additional questions for you to think about this week is if you assume the same level of progress that your company made in the previous 5 years, what will it look like 5 years from now? And what new elements will you need to create in your value chain over the next 5 years as technology, the needs of your customers, the total demographics change? And is your competitor better positioned to change their value chain than you are? And why? And what would you do differently? So get your notebook out. Take your 10 to 15 minutes a day. That's all it takes is about 10 to 15 minutes. Get that creative muscle exercised. And over about a 30-day period, you'll find yourself to be much more creative. So go ahead and work on that. Now, if you want to stay up in Killer Innovations, you can text the word innovate to 33444. If you're outside the U.S., you can send an email to innovate@killerinnovations.com. Check out today's show notes over at killerinnovations.com. We'll have all of the links to all of the URLs and sites that we talked about here on the show. Also, you can find there how to connect in with the group over at LinkedIn and other locations. Also, don't miss out the other great shows on BizTalk Radio Network. Visit biztalkradio.com. Today's show is engineered by Jeremiah, who always has to keep me on track. I'm Phil McKinney. Don't let the innovation critics get you down. Keep on innovating. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
The opinions you hear on Biz Talk Radio are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect those of this station, Biz Talk Radio, its management, or advertisers. The information on Biz Talk Radio does not constitute a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or service. If you have any questions about Biz Talk Radio, contact us at 817-274-1609 or at biztalkradio.com. Biz Talk Radio.